that it's almost Valentine's Day, I thought it would be fun to pick apart a famous love song. And I picked Something by George Harrison, written for the Beatles on their Abbey Road album. This is a song that John Lennon said was the best song on the album, and Paul McCartney said that it was the best song that George ever wrote. And even though it's been more than 50 years since the song was released, it's still being covered regularly. And in fact, it's one of the most covered songs of all time. So what makes Something so special? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Hi, I'm Brian from Unmute Your Muse, where we do 5-minute masterclasses once a week, where we teach you to write the kind of songs that people will love, buy, and tell their friends about. George Harrison was the lead guitar player for the Beatles, and he's the Beatle that probably most often gets overlooked. He got to write at least a couple songs on most of their albums, and he actually wrote this one, Something, while they were in the studio recording the White Album. He wrote it on piano originally, and then it turned into a guitar song, but he didn't get it done in time to actually put on the White Album, so it ended up being on their next release, which was Abbey Road, perhaps their most popular album of all time. Now initially, everybody thought that it was about his wife at the time, Pattie Boyd, and in the promotional video that they made for the song, you do see George and Pattie walking hand in hand around their property. Now Pattie's is one of these special ladies that seems to attract great men and great songs more than just maybe anybody else in modern history. She ended up leaving George for his good friend Eric Clapton, and Clapton even went on to write some very famous songs about her. Supposedly the song Layla from when Eric was in with Derek and the Dominoes was about Pattie before he was able to marry her, and then perhaps his most famous love song of all time, Wonderful Tonight, was very clearly about Pattie. Now, later on down the road, George went on to say that he would never actually wrote the song about Pattie, that's just what everybody assumed, but it was to his Hare Krishna friends, he said that the song was about Krishna, and in other interviews he said that it was perhaps maybe just about God as an idea of universal love. Over the years, it's been covered by the likes of Frank Sinatra, James Brown, Elvis Presley, Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and many, many more. And regardless of what George was actually intending when he wrote the song, it has stood the test of time as an amazing love song that people continue to use to this day. So let's break it apart a little bit and figure out what makes it so special. So we're going to look at 4 things in this video, 2 of which are musical and 2 of which are lyrical. First, we're going to start with a little melodic/chordal idea that George does at the beginning of the song. So the first 4 chords of the song are C major. I'm going to add another octave on top. And then it goes to C major 7, the little triangle symbol is the jazz symbol for a major 7 chord, so it's just a major triad with a 7 on top. Really pretty. And then it becomes a normal dominant 7 chord, goes a flat 7, and then it goes to F. So C, C major 7, C dominant, F. And using it that way, you get this really nice little chromatic line. Now, chromatic means just going in order by half steps. Just hitting every note as you go along, and for the first 3 chords there, it's all just C chords with this little chromatic line walking down the top of it. And even in the melody, that's imitated. It's, something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. So even the melody imitates that chromatic line. Now, to make things even more interesting, George does the same technique again over top of different chords in, I guess, what you could call the refrain. It's only 4 bars long, so it's probably not big enough to actually call it a chorus. But in the don't wanna leave her now, I know I believe in how. So it's A minor, and then A minor with a major 7, which is a really unusual chord. I very much like it. It's very dissonant. And then it goes to a regular A minor 7, the flat 7, to a D major. So again, we get this little chromatic walk down. Now this time the melody is off doing other things, but you just hear these chords happening in the background. Don't wanna leave her now, I know I believe in how. Now, chromaticism is a really easy way to add a little bit of cool interest and expectation with your listener, because they hear it going down like that, and then when it's time to go off and start doing some other things, they're like, ooh, that was different, I wasn't expecting that. And you can get some really fun chords that aren't even in the key, which is a great way to do that. Speaking of chords that aren't even in the key, let's look at the next thing. Now, another interesting thing that George does is one of these chords that he picks, and I'm going to focus on this D7 right here in the third line of each of the verses. Now, for those of you who have watched my video on functions, you will know that the D is built on the second scale degree, and in a major key like this, we're in C major, you would expect that the 2 chord, the chord built on the second note of the scale, would be a minor chord. But here we have a dominant chord. It's D dominant. Let me just play it for you so you can hear how it sounds in context. Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. Something in the way she woos me. It's really bright, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. So it has that F sharp in it instead of an F natural that we would expect in a D chord. It's a dominant chord where we want to hear, where our ears are expecting to hear a minor chord. So it sounds really bright and it's unexpected. So why is he using it that way? And the answer is in this. I'm going to give it to you in classical music terms. This is what we would call a secondary dominant. Now, a dominant chord is normally the 5 chord. If you go back and review that video on functions if you haven't done so lately. The 5 chord in this song is, since we're in the key of C, the 5 chord is G. So we would be expecting to hear some G dominants. But what we have here is what we call a secondary dominant, because it's a dominant in another key that's not actually the key that the song is in. So D7 is the dominant that you would expect to hear in the key of G, which is the chord that it resolves to. So what we have going on here is this D kind of pops out of nowhere, and we're like, that's not even in the right key. What's going on here? But when you hear it resolve to the G, it's like, oh, that's cool. It really fits. It resolves very cleanly to that G that comes next. And the G is fine to use because that is the 5 chord in the key of C. And so it all works out in the end. That's called a secondary dominant, and it's a great thing you can to get a little bit of an outside sound. So if you're looking for an easy way to get some outside sounds into your chord progression, a secondary dominant is a really great way to go. I should probably make an entire video about how to do that. I think I will. We'll look for that in the future. Okay, now I want to point out just a couple of lyrical things that I think make this song really interesting. First of all, let's look at the number of lines here. So in each verse, we have 3 lines, which is a very unstable number of lines, especially since there's a rhyme in the first and third line. Ooh, but let's look at that rhyme a little more closely here first. So we have something in the way she moves, and then in the third line, it's something in the way she woos me. So we're actually having this, the rhyme is between moves and woos, and even though we have this extra little syllable dangling out here at the end, it still happens in the same place rhythmically in the song, so our ears are picking up on that as a rhyme. And it's fine to do stuff like that, to have just an extra little syllable dangling on there, but our ears are still going to pick up on that because it's happening at the same place within the line. Okay, and so going back to the number of lines, we've got 3 lines here, which is a rather unstable kind of thing, especially with this rhyme here. Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. Something in the way she woos me, and then you're expecting to hear da-da-da-da-da-da-da of her. Like that's what our ears are hearing. But he just skips that last one and goes straight on to the I don't want to leave her now, the little refrain thing here. Now that's a really interesting technique because it's surprising when you get to here, and that is offering the listener just a little bit more interest. It keeps their attention a little bit better. And also, I think it also supplements the fact that he's, so far as, even though this is a love song and he's very clearly talking about somebody that he's very much in love with, he's still being very mysterious about it. Like he doesn't know what it is about the way that she moves or something in the way she knows. He's using all of these vague words, something, something, somewhere. He doesn't know the specifics. The love that he has is still kind of mysterious to him, and so that goes very well with this kind of unstable structure for the verses. I think that's great songwriting. And one other thing I want to point out lyrically about the verses is what I'm calling parallelism, where each verse has some very similar structures to it. Now, I already pointed out that the first word in each verse is one of those vague something, something, somewhere, and that happens again during the third line of each verse where we have something, something, something. And so you hit those same kinds of ideas at the same point in the verse. It's not like every word or every line is exactly the same, but it has these little touch points. It gives the song a little bit of coherence and a little more stability to kind of balance off some of the unstable parts, like using the 3-line structure and the really kind of vague and mysterious topic that he's talking about. So that's just some really good songwriting. There's 1,000 other things in this song that I could probably point out that makes for some really great songwriting, but this one is a masterwork. George Harrison nailed it on this one. Now, I hope that was helpful. I think it's a very good idea for us as songwriters to sometimes break apart the songs that we really like in order to figure out how they work, just so we can, steal little ideas here and there and be able to put things together in new combinations when we're writing our own songs. There's nothing wrong with doing that. That's how everybody else learned. The Beatles, in fact, were famous for studying tons and tons and tons of other artists' work and getting to understand why they worked the way they did, and then being able to build their own songs out of the different pieces that they claimed from other people. That's just the way music works. Nothing wrong with it, so take advantage. I will see you guys around.